Hello, everyone, and welcome to CTO Craft Bytes. Today, I am absolutely delighted that we're joined by Lex Pedersen, and we're going to be talking about flexible learning and all kinds of topics related to that. If this is your first time at CTO Craft Bytes, let me tell you a bit more about this group. CTO Craft is a mentoring and coaching community for technology leaders around the world, focusing on supporting technologists in their leadership growth. Community members are over 8,000, and CTO Craft provides them with one-to-one coaching, mentoring groups, a curated Slack community, and events like this one. If you're not a member of the CTO Craft community and are interested in becoming one, or if you'd like to get emails, updates on this event by email, I'm going to post some links in the chat to help you do just that. I'd like to say a huge thanks to our headline partner, AWS, for making these Bytes events possible, and a special thanks to O'Reilly for sponsoring this particular event. So, I'll let Lex introduce O'Reilly. Is that all right? So I'm Zoe Cunningham. I'm a director at Software Technology, and I've worked there for over 20 years. It keeps creeping up. I think it's like nearly 23 now, maybe, after starting as a coder in 2000. And now I engage with the tech community through events like this one, as well as hosting the software podcast, Tech Talks, which is available on all good podcast platforms. So Lex is the VP of EMEA at O'Reilly. And Lex, can you tell us a bit about yourself? And I do like to ask that because it's great. There's so many things to know about in an introduction. And I think it's good to know about you and what you do now. And as I just mentioned about O'Reilly. Also, I'm always very interested in people's journeys for how they got to where they are right now. Because I think sometimes, we see people in roles and we think, gosh, VP of EMEA, that's really important. Like, but how did you get there?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, and thank you to everyone who's joined today. I'm Lex, I'm based in London and VP for EMEA, as Zoe mentioned. So I guess first of all, in terms of my background and my role, I joined Xerox on a graduate program actually, and that provided a lot of experience in different areas of the organization, mainly customer facing, but marketing, sales, customer success, as the new term is today. And then after Xerox, my background really took me through a technology background. I worked at Microsoft for quite some time, and then in other learning organizations. I've been with O'Reilly now for 9 years. I think my passion is definitely, I love communicating and understanding customers' goals, requirements. The topic of learning is very dear to me. My parents have been in education, and I think, what you can get from that for yourself, but in your organization as well, is huge. The value it can bring to you. And at O'Reilly for 9 years, I've been in a number of different roles, and some of those have been in sales, working with strategic accounts, supporting customers in their journey for investing in learning and getting the most out of that. And now as a VP, it's working with many CTOs actually at the executive level to support critical projects, make sure that the investment that companies are making in a learning tool that we have at O'Reilly to be of value, to bring investment, a good return on investment, so that it really brings value to what they're looking to achieve. So I think just to finish off, in terms of O'Reilly, perhaps many of this audience will know the O'Reilly tech books. They're very iconic with the animals on the front. So we still do that. We still publish and edit books and put them into the bookshops. You'll see them in Waterstones. And many new programmers are still learning from the original O'Reilly tech books. The area I work in the business is our learning platform. So we take all those books, we digitize them onto a platform, onto a website, and there's much more to it. We do videos, there's coding labs, live courses. All of this comes together to spread the knowledge of innovators. So for all of those CTOs listening today, the conversation being about how flexible learning can really add value to your organization and to your employees. I hope that covers what you were looking for.
Well, I think it's really good to cover that because I only found out that O'Reilly did things that weren't books
Yeah.
through having chats with people from O'Reilly on CTO craft calls. So, yeah, I think so many people don't know. Although when you think about it, it's such an obvious evolution because back when I was learning to code from O'Reilly books, that was the only option really. You know, you either went to university or you went on a formal course to learn something, or you didn't learn very much computer programming in school for sure. Or you kind of read a book and there wasn't very much available. Whereas obviously you think about an online platform, it's kind of just a better book in lots of ways, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what's so interesting, and people are learning in different ways. Some people still love a traditional book and they want it physically in their hand. Some prefer the mobile app. That works really well, particularly if you're out walking the dog and you want to listen to an audio book instead of reading it. But maybe you want to listen to a conference. Maybe it's a live event that got recorded and you can listen to that. There's also the ability to not just have books, but some people really like video and some people like interactive experiences with colleagues. So I think it is all about understanding everyone's different. How do people want to learn? And when is it convenient for them to learn, at a moment that makes sense to them in their work and their home life, to bring that to them. So I think you're right. The natural evolution is having an online place that people can go and having a choice of what that format might be. We tend to talk about it as a container, really. It's making sure that you get the best quality information that's needed to learn in a meaningful way. You don't want to learn something that's not credible or correct. So, valid quality content. And then what's the container? How do you want to take on that information? So yeah, I mean, I love your example. So many young people even now are still, I think, using very traditional methods to learning. We call that structured learning, taking something from beginning to end and learning a new skill, learning a new programming language. And that's very valid. That goes on a lot. We actually see, particularly with organizations where you've got a lot of very clever, proficient employees, they've done their role a long time. When they're learning a programming language, or maybe they're moving into leadership, they learn slightly differently, actually. They tend to dip in and out. They don't really want that structured approach. They can get a bit frustrated. They're very busy. They've got a lot going on. So it's also, how does that flexible learning for that audience need to work so that they can just get that piece of information when they want it?
I love this. We're still on introductions, but we're already into the topic because it's so important. I just want to say before we do get too deep into the topic, I love, as a moderator, I love to get questions from the audience. And the reason for that is that it means I know that we're talking about the kind of things you want to learn about. I'm always perfectly happy asking my own questions and finding out all the things I want to find out. But yeah, the earlier people ask questions, the more time it gives us to make sure that we can deal with all the questions. I've done so many talks where you say any questions, and then nothing, and then in the last 5 minutes everyone's like, oh no, I've got a question. So yeah, please do put your questions in early so that we can weave them in then to our discussion. There is an ask a question feature, so if you're able to use the ask a question feature, that's helpful for me to have all the questions in one place. If you put them in the chat, I will try and keep an eye on the chat as well, just to make sure I don't miss anything. But ask a question is best if you have, if you're able to ask your questions there. So thank you very much. All right, so let's kick off by talking really broadly about what requirements do businesses have in order to be able to innovate and ultimately be successful?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, right now we know there's so much digital transformation happening. COVID has accelerated that. And really at the heart for so many organizations, it's how do they remain competitive? How do they innovate? So much went digital overnight, and that brings a lot of challenges, but also opportunities at the same time. So I think for so many organizations, and it's hard to sort of generalize because it depends on industry sectors as well. Some move a lot faster than others, but I think there's a couple of key areas, I suppose, for innovation. certainly making sure that there's a sense of critical projects still happening. It can get very challenging with the finances if people are concerned about economic times and trying to hold back. But actually, I think to innovate, you still really need to invest. You still need to move ahead. And to innovate and to do that, you need, critical projects, whether it's around cloud, security, AI, investing in some new areas, new products and services. And then to do that, you're going to need really good people. And that's at the heart of so much, whether you've got the talent already or you need to bring on board some new talent or upskill in areas that perhaps you haven't got the knowledge in-house already. So I think some of that is huge to being able to move forward and innovate. And of course, to stay competitive and stay ahead, the world, it gets challenging, right, with some of those global aspects as well. So, how do you continue to innovate yourself and transform and move forward? So, yeah, for me, there's probably a couple of things, strong leadership, vision, direction, investment in where you need to be going and having that clear path and direction. And then the people surely sit at the heart of that at every level, right?
Right.
Top to the bottom. Yeah.
I was just reflecting, in fact, on how there's so many different things we need to. It always seems definitely like when you're in the middle of it, there's so much going on, there's so much needs to be done, there's so many competing priorities. Actually, at the end of the day, they all boil down to people, don't they? So every one of those challenges is a people challenge, right up to leadership, around what skills you have, because what you're doing and how you're approaching leadership comes down to what skills you have and what you've learnt going forwards, and then right through the organization. So I think that, and definitely it's something that occupies or is a topic for a large number of our CTO craft sessions, right, is actually how do you find the right people? Who are the right people? How do you find the right people? How do you get them on board? And then how do you make sure they can do what they need to do? So let's talk then. Let's try, and I want to kind of just narrow down with my questions.
Sure.
Because you've talked about digital transformation, so I think that this is something where a lot of organizations are now more heavily invested in technology or heavily dependent on technology than they were previously. And so there's a lot of people learning, a lot of us have been doing it for a long time, but there's also a lot of people learning about what does this relationship look like between business and technology, and what's the relationship between business needs and what the technology team delivers, which then leads on to what does the technology team need. So what are the things, if you're a CTO and you're like, okay, great, well, my business has got to come up with a totally new way of working and they've got to reskill everyone, and what are the needs of tech leaders, essentially, or the tech department?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because, when you think traditionally about learning and people, it tends to sit in like learning and development or HR. What I notice with so many companies that we work with, the really successful ones, it starts from the top at the C level. And particularly because of the digital transformation, where the CTOs are getting involved with learning as part of that tech transformation, you see huge success, greater success, because for a number of reasons. One, you've got executive buy-in with the understanding of the vision, like what is it you need to achieve and where you're going to go. I think that's the first thing, to know what the destination is. And then from that, actually, with the technology needing to be cutting edge, that's a decision and a benefit that sits within technology. HR and L&D traditionally, wonderful job of making sure people have learning and measuring its success. But I think when you look at the CTO and the role of the CTO, they really have their finger on the pulse around, well, we're moving to the cloud. We're doing, cloud migration, hybrid cloud. I've got to have people certified, or we've got a massive agile transformation going on, or DevOps. And some of these become critical projects to what you originally said around innovation. So I think, what I notice is when CTOs do take a passion for learning and for that to be part of their business that they're running, it's huge what can be gained from that. And it will vary because every ecosystem is a bit different, isn't it? One organization to the next, one industry. But I would say, for CTOs that can take an interest in learning and be passionate about what that brings, and ensure access to learning, I suppose, at what makes sense for those individuals, then you really start to see and accept, well, you need that, right? You need the new knowledge, you need the new skill sets that are required to be able to implement these projects that that they'll have on their to-do list, right? Ultimately.
Right.
And we see
Yeah.
the trends, those topics like cloud security and AI keep coming up because they're important to so many businesses.
I think it's really interesting what you're saying there as well about the CTO is much more involved in these kinds of decisions about how do you provide a learning environment and what training is available, what training needs to be available, and how, even down to how people are going to learn in perhaps a way that historically, maybe you could have more of we have an HR department, we have a learning team, people need to know communication, they need to learn people, not that these things aren't important, but perhaps they were more standard across businesses and across teams within businesses than the kind of learning that a CTO needs to be implementing. And actually, the thing, and this is my favorite phrase I use in almost every single talk, is technology is complex, and everything about technology is super complex, and it's not simply a case of saying, oh, cloud, you don't as a CTO phone someone up and go, I need some cloud training, and they go, great, here's 3 providers who will give you, you've got a much more specific requirement than that, right? It's not just a one size fits all out of the box, I'm just going to go and buy a training. We have a joke at Software that came when someone once asked us to quote for a normal software, and it was like one of our favorite jokes, because there's no such thing as a normal software, right? It's actually, there isn't standardization within, or not in that kind of way, everything's so complex, everyone's needs are slightly different. And so the CTO needs to be involved, I think. I mean, obviously organizations arrange themselves differently, but I do think it's an area where to be effective, you can't just hand it over to someone who doesn't understand what the technology is. So we've kind of, I was
just to add to that, I think you're so right, because the technology stack is going to vary from one to the other, the goals, the projects, and having the technology leader involved is going to help keep that direction on track. And you're right, I think traditional learning, which maybe you go off and do a course or you're out of the office for a couple of days, just seems very old-fashioned now. Everything's happening very quickly, so we tend to talk about learning in the flow of work, learning as a productivity tool. So yes, you might do get certified for GCP or AWS, a cloud provider, but then what? Then you actually go and do the job, and you actually need some real support to get things correct. So, if you can go to somewhere that's credible with the right answers, that's just dipping in and out in the moment of need. And that should just happen all the time without really thinking about it. It's not like, oh, I need a week off to go learn. You can just do it every day. You just dip in and out, you get the information, and then the projects are on time. There's less coding bugs, there's fewer Jira tickets. You can actually be very productive. And it's sort of turning learning on its head a little bit. But by having that sit within technology, I think is very powerful. And of course, connecting with L&D teams and HR is important, but the tech groups know what they need, right? And they need the coding labs to practice so that then when they go live, it's actually going to work.
Yeah, exactly. And like you say, so much of learning is like for technology. I suppose that's my background. So whenever I say so much of learning, I'm always talking about technology learning, because that's the kind of learning I've been doing. But it's so practical, isn't it? Like that's what you're saying. It's not just you, and this is again, I guess, kind of back to the evolution of O'Reilly, that obviously your books are brilliant, but you don't just know C# after you've read a book about C#. That's not, everyone who's learned a language knows that's not how it works. There's actually this whole process of doing that needs to happen. And it actually makes me think, we used to I think there's this kind of idea of separating out of learning and doing that I think is a bit false, again, like based on my experiences, that really you always learn while you do. And I think what you're talking about with bringing in flexible learning approaches to recognize that just gives you more control over what you learn when you do. You don't just learn the quickest way to do something and do that over and over again. It allows you, to be, do you see what I'm kind of saying?
Totally, so for example, if you are head deep in a book and you're learning, a new programming language, what better to then go straight into the sandbox and practice it and see if you're actually getting this right. So, that's something we bring is with that flexible learning approach is to do that, learn something, practice it, maybe share it with your colleagues and collaborate so that it really just continues to be part of your workflow, really. And the same with that idea of work, learning in the flow of work where, just dipping in and out all the time, learn something and then go practice it. And I think someone's made a really good comment on the screen there about, you can't learn to swim without getting your feet wet.
Right.
Completely agree. And it's a bit like, I think someone was asking me about leadership, and it's like, becoming a leader, the more you do it, the better you get, probably, because you practice, you have different experiences. It's great to have, and we see that with technology, moving, you're an individual contributor, highly successful. And then what happens when you get promoted? You need support in that management and that leadership role. And the more you can practice and learn and practice, the better you probably become as you come across different experiences, right?
Yeah, I think that's another good point about technology, or definitely, again, my experience of technology, that it all changes so quickly and your roles change so quickly. And you kind of talked about the different experiences you've had in different roles and different organizations that you've worked for, right? And how much learning there is. I think we're all expected to learn a lot more as well nowadays, or perhaps not even, we're not expected to learn, we're expected to just instantly know.
Yeah. Well, I remember reading about Madonna, and she's very good at reinventing herself, and they gave 9 examples of how she's, over time. And I think that's so true for all of us, actually. Stay current, reinvent yourself, learn those new skills that the current world is looking for, and take ownership, have curiosity for learning. And, I think organizations can do a good job to support that, create the culture of learning, have people that take an interest at the top level to support a culture that says it's okay to go learn. And we've got customers now that are taking non-technical employees and taking them on a journey to become front-end developers and, start learning some programming skills, because there is a shortage, as many of us know. We are not able to fill the roles quick enough, and the projects that we need with the talent isn't quite ready. So there is this huge need, reinvent yourself, gain some new skills. I feel like I'm trying to do that myself. The AI world is really coming together, isn't it? And it's like, I need to learn more about that.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, so let's talk then in like a bit more detail about what kind of tools are there for CTOs to use. And I suppose there's this distinction, isn't there, between what you need to learn as an individual and what you need to be able to implement as the leader of the tech team, I guess, is the distinction I'm making. So what kind of options do you have if you are a CTO and you're like, gosh, I've got to get all these things delivered, and the deadlines are always close as well, right? So it's always a case of, I've got these people, I've got a whole bunch of open vacancies, because who doesn't? On a tech team, there's always if I also had these people, it would go a bit quicker, but I've got to get these things done. And what options and tools are there?
Yeah, exactly. So, I think the first thing is to get the right solution and tools in place, you have to know what you want to achieve. What is it you're looking for? And, we do a really good job of working closely with customers to know what is it that they need to get out of this? What are the learning goals, the business criteria that we're aiming for? And for some, it's very simple. It might be, I've got 100 people, 1,000 people that need to get certified. For others, it's actually, we've got a huge project that we need to fulfill on time, and that's going to involve a number of different skill sets. For some, like you said, it's sort of talent retention and acquisition of talent as well, and how do you go about that? So there's tools out there. I can speak for O'Reilly, obviously, where there's an online solution, and that supports the whole tech stack with the breadth and depth of content in a way that people can learn how they want. So when you look at a CTO and perhaps this huge to-do list and tasks that need to be delivered on time, that solution might look different for different teams, right, and for different people. So I think what is very successful for O'Reilly is the ability to provide one comprehensive solution of quality content, but people get from it what they need in the roles that they're in. So whether it's accessing a Harvard Business Review case study because you moved into leadership, whether you're the people with nitty-gritty coding labs and you need to be practicing, whether it's reading a book or a video, watching a video, being part of like a conference, an online conference, and sharing ideas with other like-minded individuals. Another technique that we've brought out, which is quite exciting, is something called Catters, where we have architect for the software architects, and now we're doing one for data, where teams can get together, collaborate on a real project and a problem, and then submit that, and then there'll be like a competition and an outcome to it. So they're all learning to collaborate, and they're also learning from each other and what other teams are submitting. So it's kind of trying to bring that real life experience to the forefront. So I think it changes the concept of learning. Like you said at the beginning, you start with a book, and that's still true and valid and very credible, whether you dip in and out or beginning to end, but it's so much more than that. And it could be, you're walking the dog and you want to listen to something, or you're stuck on a project, you're going to dip in, or you're going to collaborate on a nice coding project and learn something really enriching. So I think the tools are out there, lots of options for sure. It's making sure that it works and you get the results that you need. How do you invest in something and make sure people then are going to use it and get value from that? And ultimately, yes, that project's going to get delivered on time or within budget. And I think for us, we love to check in on that. We love to sort of say to a customer, right, you're using O'Reilly, give me an example, what you used it for. Did you get that project in on time? Or, they got the right coding snippet, they didn't get an error, or they checked the error bug and, got that resolved. Good old Uncle Bob, you probably know Uncle Bob, Robert Martin, he's very popular. We have him as a live practitioner, but we have his book and his video, and people, he has a great following, obviously, and that has huge benefits for people having access to that, as to your point, a tool, a technique with credible content that people can get access to do good work, to make an impact, right?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because obviously, like, I understand that, like, you're coming kind of from the O'Reilly point of view, but actually I think all of those ideas are much more widely applicable, and that this concept of, like, one of the things that struck me is like having everything in one place, or having a comprehensive like central location, and then a comprehensive strategy of all these different ways of learning is absolutely essential. And the word, to keep on our book metaphors, but the word that jumped out at me was, it's a kind of library, isn't it? And actually we've almost moved from, in the days when we only had books, you would have one book on each topic maybe, or a few on your bigger topics, and they would fit on one shelf. In fact, in software we have a physical library with all our books in, and so people can go and borrow them and read them and learn from them. But the amount of information in that library, you can take it in by scanning the shelves and saying, what am I learning about? I'm learning about C#, right? I'm going here, and here's a book. And I think that there is now so much content in the world. Yeah. We're living in this, golden age of content where there is so much, and obviously that applies to training options as well, right? That there are a better way. There's more out there than just all the books in the world, and there's better ways of indexing and accessing this information and finding out what's appropriate than just scanning through a bunch of titles. So that was kind of like one of the things that really stood out to me. Have you got any kind of particular tips for
Well, I
how
think,
to build a strategy or
yeah, I mean, you're so right, because information's out there. It's how do you find it and how do you get the answer that you need. So, well, obviously, there's ChatGPT now, which people are sort of talking about. We have a search engine where you can ask questions. It's got machine learning at the back end, so you can literally go ask a question and go to the heart of a book or a video to get the answer, and that's a great time saver. But in answer to your question, I guess, around strategy, you want something that is going to incorporate the needs of the organization. So, when you think about the talent in the team, and there's different skill levels, those that are beginner and those that are more advanced, do they need the same thing? They probably some need beginner information, some intermediate, some advanced, some want it in a certain format, some want it in others. So I think you do need a lot of flexibility. Of course, like you said, there's O'Reilly, that's one option. Otherwise, you could go for lots of different options, more specialized in niche areas, I guess. I think it's important to cover the communication aspect, because you mentioned strategy, and I think the tools and techniques is one aspect, but how do you make that successful when you, as a CTO, if you're going to invest in a learning solution and help support your teams to get the information they need to be productive and innovate, then what does that actually look like? It involves communication, it involves buy-in from the business, it involves those checkpoints to make sure it's successful and it's working and it's aligning to what you want it to be. Something I find really interesting on that, actually, is we often see 20% of learning happening at the weekends, and I find that's really interesting, because if you think about what you said, CTOs, their strategy, I sort of think, right, they've got their list of what they need to get done this year, and here's the goals. I bet on that list, they're not going to write down, I need my teams to be working at the weekends, or encouraging that. But, I think when you build that communication and that curiosity of learning, your teams actually do choose to be productive at a time that makes sense for them. So when they are on the weekend, and whether kids are watching TV or out walking the dog, but there's these opportunities where you for yourself just want to improve and get productive and learn. And I just love that, because I think if you do invest in something and you make it interesting, build curiosity, make sure it's in tune with what people need to learn, they actually do want to do it, and they're actually choosing to do it in their free time, even though it's perhaps work related, of course, on the projects, but they care, they want to take ownership for that. And I mean, that it doesn't get better than that, right? If you're a CTO and you've got teams that are actually choosing to be highly productive on the weekend because they really care about their career and their projects that they're working on, I think what a lovely outcome to know that you facilitated that, perhaps as a CTO, to give that employee benefit to them. And we see it with startups as well. I mean, startups are moving at such a fast pace. They might have some investment funding from VCs. How do busy, fast moving organizations like that give something back to their employees to say, you're not alone, it's busy, we've got a lot going on here, we're investing in you, we're investing in your career, we're going places, and here's some tools and techniques that you can use at a time when you need it. And I think when you see learning at the weekend, that tells you a lot about what's happening in a very positive way for that organization.
It's such a basic human need, isn't it, actually, to learn? And I feel like we're all interested in learning all the time. And actually, it's one of these great, magic scenarios when you're actually paired with a job where you love learning about that job, right, that you're doing. Like, isn't that just the best scenario, really, like you say? But then learning, I feel that love of learning can be quickly destroyed if it's not engaged with in the right way. And we can all, because I think technologists actually are people who value almost more than other types of people, right? You're interested in technology because you're like, oh, that's neat, and that's neat, and that's neat. And there's such a big difference between finding out something new, which everyone does all the time, and then being forced, or coerced into engaging with a form of training or learning that is not doing anything for you, I think that really almost puts you off the whole idea of doing anything, doesn't it? So I think this setting up, and I also I think it's great when you have people solving their own problems again. Like, I don't believe that senior leadership have all the answers to people's day-to-day problems, including what they need to learn to do their next job, right? Or their next piece of work. And the more people at an individual level are empowered to make that choice, and I think the better result for everyone.
Yeah, and you want that culture, right? Create that culture of empowerment so that you can go seek the answer, work with colleagues on it, and provide opportunity. I think going back to your point about learning there, it would be stale if it was the same job day in, day out, year after year. But I think with technology, it's exciting. There's always something new that you can move on to. There's always a different avenue you could go down and explore. And particularly with the pace that's happening now with digitization so quickly, we're all keen to learn more. The buzzwords come around, blockchain, AI, and everyone's like, what is that? Let me learn about that. And have you as a CTO enabled your employees to find out what that is, to go and explore what the next programming language might be, and just dabble in it and try it and see what might come from that. And then I think for those career journeys, it's a very exciting time if organizations can present those opportunities to move people along. Whether you're an accountant and you're now going to perhaps get into some data engineering, take some of those math skills and start to move on a little bit. That could be a lovely new destination. And same with obviously other technology roles where you can explore and sort of move on. But yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot there, and it's making learning interesting, exciting. There's nothing worse than being told you've got to do it, and then you've got to sort of go from A to B to C just to pass it. I think you want to make it interesting. That's the other thing. I mean, with learning, sometimes, people are like, well, you'll do an assessment to see where you are. But how true is that as well? You just tick some multi-choice questions, and are you really proficient in Python? Maybe not. You just winged it a little bit on the test. Whereas I think if you can build curiosity around a project and get someone learning Python and properly getting stuck in, they'll get a lot more success from that.
And it's a lot more detailed than, understanding of Python is a lot more detailed than you can ever convey with checkboxes, right? There's always multiple ways of doing things and sophisticated choices you can take, like in any programming language. So I think that's a really good prompt to kind of flip it around a bit, because we've been talking about like the responsibilities you have as a CTO. And we've kind of through that got to, well, what does the employee need and what's the employee learning journey? And I think that's a really interesting mindset to be coming at if you're a CTO, because actually, what does it look like for them, and what support does an employee need, or how does it work for them?
Yeah, exactly. I still think there can be that culture around making sure that they're allowed to do it. There's often that, can I, can't I, should I, shouldn't I be doing this? So I think that's really important, to make sure that you feel well supported to be able to do the learning and access the information when you need to do it. If it is something more formal, like a certification, CISSP, AWS, whatever, it's designating time to that as well. I think leaders can do a good job of supporting that, whether it's, a certain lunch break or an afternoon. I also really love the idea of collaboration. So I think it's really nice when you're empowered to go learn and then let's regroup and talk about it. We do that in our team, go learn something, and then next month on our team meeting, we'll come together and actually talk about that topic. And people pick up on different aspects to it. So it's sort of bringing that conversation into the workplace, isn't it? And making it valid. And then ultimately, as we mentioned, it's making sure how's it going to be successful? Is it, perhaps if you're working on the website and you don't want bugs, right, you're going to reduce the Jira ticket. So that's quite measurable. And that's something, it could be, here's the learning solution that we're investing in your career. And then in a month's time, 2 months' time, we can check in on that. How's that improving and making life better for you, with the coding you're perhaps doing. So I think having those dialogues, and of course, many organizations do, reviews, 360s, personal development plans, whatever that formal process might be. If you have it, that's a great time to engage a conversation around learning, both from the manager and the employee. What is it you want to achieve in the next 12 months? What's that journey looking like? And how to facilitate that and make time for it.
And like you say, in the best case, it's win-win, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
An employee wants to learn and wants to grow their career, and a CTO needs more highly skilled resource.
Yeah.
And and so it's kind of like this, when everyone's happy with what's happening, I think that's just such a good sign, isn't it? That
and the
you're
success
going in the right
value
direction.
of that, because you've also got to think about what does it look like in a year, 2 year, 3 years time. We are where we are today, perhaps with a gap, but do we need some more leaders next year? Are we going to need more teams on this project? Which area of the business is growing with products? Do we need to double down on a particular area? So I think it's also having that vision, I guess, for CTOs and for leaders. Someone once said to me, just take a helicopter view, go high, look wide, and look, what does that look like in the distance, where we are today, but where are we going? What do we need? And if you think about your talent and your teams, and the skills, it's also preparing for that, isn't it? It's going to take them time perhaps to get a new skill and get up to speed. So what you do today will reap some rewards for perhaps next year and the year after, and sort of have that succession planning in place.
Right, which is actually another form of flexibility, isn't it? That we've kind of talked about, flexible ways of ingesting your learning, I guess, is kind of what I was thinking we were talking about. But actually, there's also this idea of having a flexible skill set.
Yeah,
is so important, and actually being able to deal with different types of challenges that the organization have, having employees who are equipped to deal with multiple types of roles and challenges. I think that's really important.
Oh, you're so right. I notice, because obviously we've got a lot of data analytics on the learning at the back end. So, what's trending, which is great because it makes sure that we can bring out the latest tech trends with what people are needing and seeing. And what I find interesting is with so many tech audiences, of course, you've got the topics you'd expect for technologists, but in there will also be a lot of soft skills training, critical thinking, presentation skills, communicating, mentorship. Just because people are passionate and working on technology doesn't mean to say that some of the softer skills that also go with the success of a career, they're very important as well. And I love seeing that when I look at the data and you can see some of that come through. It's the very human aspect to so much of this, isn't it? Which for CTOs will be huge, particularly working with their leadership teams and managers. Because I remember reading a book once, and it's like, you can have the most skilled or experienced people on your team, but are they motivated? And I find that so interesting. I often think about that. It's like, are my team motivated? Because that's where you're going to get the best results. Even if they're highly skilled and highly experienced, if they're not motivated to do their job, then you're not going to get the best, and they're not going to love their job. They're not going to put their 100% into it. So I think some of that motivation, how do you communicate with your teams? How do you make sure that people feel great about where they're working? They want to come in, they feel excited about the work that they're doing. They get a lot of satisfaction from that. Maybe it's about their work-life balance, but all of that soft skills side is an important aspect as well. And that's something you can, read, learn, and be part of that journey. So I think you're right. The soft skills aspect, it shouldn't be ignored, even though we're talking about some of the tech aspects.
It makes me think of something you mentioned earlier, actually, that I thought sounded really cool when we were talking about different ways of learning. Because you mentioned katas and like working together as a team and kind of submitting your answer. And that really made me kind of highlighted to me that it's all about people.
Yeah.
And actually, everything in tech is always about people, right? We think it's like the least people person business, don't we? But actually, it's all about people. And so I just thought that was a really neat example of that, that, you know, you're kind of working in a team and then using the tech to facilitate that, when maybe you would have historically done it all in a room together, but now there's different ways of doing that as well.
Yeah, particularly, exactly, especially because now everyone can log on from anywhere. So you can have teams that are crossing geographies that never happened before. You know, back in the day, you were all in the office next to each other working on something, but now you can really collaborate in a very different way with your colleagues in different parts of the world. You learn from each other's cultures and their aspects and thought processes. That adds to that teamwork that you're doing. The other one, of course, is hackathons. You know, we support lots of customers wanting to do hackathons and setting that up, and they'll use like O'Reilly as a resource to support the information that they're needing to be able to put together their projects. But just, yeah, seeing that collaboration, getting people to work together is a really important aspect. And I suppose a reminder that no matter how much tech goes on and we all get hidden behind gadgets, just still being able to communicate with your colleagues in the workplace, it's still important, isn't it, to have that skill set, and to do that you need to practice, you need to do it to
Right.
know.
Right, exactly. I mean, yeah, gosh, that I've learned on my journey. Right, let me do a final call out for questions, because we've now got just under 15 minutes left. So if anyone's got a question, please do ask it now. I've got one final question that actually is really important that we haven't discussed in very much detail, and that's measurement.
Yeah.
So yes, we all have a sense of this training is fun, this training is useful, or those people are engaging with the training, so it must be doing something. But actually, are there better ways to measure whether this is a good value, you know, whether it's good value to be investing in the various, because everyone's always running multiple different training strands at once, right? Are there good ways to measure which ones are worth it?
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic, and there's lots of different examples I can give. It's the first thing is, obviously, if you're going to invest in learning, you do need to get an outcome. Otherwise, you're not going to get that budget signed off, and you're certainly not going to get it again in the future. So I think it's important that you ask that question. You know, it's really important that you know, how is this going to help us? What is it we want to achieve from investing in some learning? And what do those goals look like? So for customers, it varies from one to the other. Everyone's got their own individual goals, but some of the common themes that come out are obviously ramp times. You know, when you're hiring talent, how quickly can you get them up to speed? You know, if it normally takes you 9 months and you can reduce it to 6 months or reduce it to 3 months, that will have a huge aspect to it. So I think there's an onboarding goal. You can look at what that program is, and that's probably where the HR and L&D groups get involved. But certainly, you know, when you're hiring talent and you're onboarding them, you know, having live coding environments and making sure that they're up to speed quickly and correctly to go live, that's huge. That has measurable outcomes. So that's one example that we see. Critical projects, obviously, you know, when you're, you know, implementing cloud strategy and you need people skilled, it's easy to measure the success, I guess, when you're putting people through a certification. You want to make sure they pass. So that's the first sort of success moment. But then the next is, as we said, then what? It goes live. And, you know, I think you need to check in. And the way we do that is through a number of ways. We sort of measure usage. We can see what's being viewed and looked at from a cloud topic area, but also surrounding adjacent topics that would go with that. And then, you know, surveys and questionnaires are a great way to get true examples of, give me an example where you implemented and used the learning to support that project. One of our customers does that. They said they don't actually need to do end user surveys. They just need to go to 4 or 5 stakeholders to get true examples of where it made a difference on a project. That for them is enough, because by the time it filters up, as long as that project did get delivered on time and they know why, because people had the skill set and the knowledge and the ability to do it, that's good. That shows that it's working.
Also, it takes a bit more to give a true example.
Yeah.
Actually takes a bit more effort than checking a box saying, it was, or you know, doing your slider, it was 7 out of 10 useful. actually that is a better demonstration. Sorry, I know you were in the middle of saying something, but I just thought that's a
No,
really
don't
good
worry.
point.
Well, there's so many different examples. I mean, another one is employee satisfaction scores. Are people feeling invested in? Organizations that are making redundancies, interestingly, we're seeing an investment in learning for those that remain, because you don't want them to be demotivated or to feel that they're going to be worried about their career. Invest in them, help get that employee satisfaction up, and that can be a measure. I mean, there's lots. Jira tickets, that's great. Coding, bugs. When everything went online, the worst thing is when you've got your customers hitting your website and then they can't get to what they need, they're dissatisfied, you've got unhappy customers. And what was that? Was it just a bug that came out of some blog chat room, coding snippets? Whereas if you can get the correct stuff going in the first place, make a smooth customer experience. So if your Jira tickets are coming down and customers are getting more satisfied, that could be a measure. We've got lots, and we tend to sort of go back to the basics of what is it you're trying to achieve in your organization? What is it you need to support with your employees around their learning goals? Manager onboarding programs as well, of course. We've talked a bit about that. So there's not one hard, fast rule. And I would say it's a very interesting topic, because historically, I think learning has been measured on, 100 people did these courses, they completed good. And I think for O'Reilly, we turn that completely on our head. For us, it's not about that. It's like we are aligning ourselves in partnership. What is it the business needs to do to innovate, and how do we support that? And then we'll measure it. Quarterly reviews, looking at data and feedback to what was set out in the first place, to make sure we're on track. And if we're not, we can adjust it, right? I mean, that's the other thing. You shouldn't just wait for a year to go by. I think you need good regular checkpoints. We do it quarterly, just to make sure we're on track, and come up with ideas, come up with ways of doing, whether it's awareness to let people know what they need to be doing, and setting some goals. People love to learn by example and best practice, don't they? So I always love it when you have what I call power users, and you can see that you've got some employees in an organization who are doing so much, and it's like, just bottle that up and share that with the rest. Like, why, how, and what are they getting from it, and how do they do it? Because so many will appreciate that, learn from it, and get a lot of ideas. I think sharing those best practices is great.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for all of your time. I don't know whether to should we just get in like one final question?
How do we have 8 minutes?
There's none online, so I get to ask questions, which is brilliant. I think that what do you do? Because I think this is just a situation that crops up so much when your schedule is just full. Your schedule is full. And yes, of course, we want to invest in training. We want to not keep having this problem in the future. But right now we have to deliver these things. What are the top tips for helping yourself get out of that situation, I guess?
Yeah, I know. I totally hear that. It's really challenging, isn't it? All of us are so busy, and how do you prioritize? I think for any of us, planning is key, isn't it? Getting organized and planning, and just take that moment to step back and think, right, what is it I need to organize this year and implement? And as leaders, you have to be able to delegate. That's huge. Just because this might sit on your to-do list doesn't mean you're the one to actually implement it. Hopefully there's some resources and support internally, and certainly for CTOs, that's where you could work with your colleagues if you have them in HR, L&D. We're definitely seeing more chief people officers and learning come a much higher level. Digital innovation officer. There's a lot of new titles now coming out as well, where I think organizations are recognizing the need for learning, and it needs to be strategic at the highest level. And CTOs that have looked at it, tried to invest, they're busy, and so that's recognized, and there might be support in the organization to facilitate that with a colleague or two. And I would say, it doesn't have to sit sit on the shoulders of a CTO. The direction can be set, or the initiative, and then pass that on to somebody who can find the time as part of their job role to perhaps look into it, and then come back and recircle when it is time to say, we've looked into this, we've got a good sense of what's needed, we've done our research, we've looked at the data, and now we can make a recommendation. And then the CTO is actually there to sort of say, yep, that they validate that makes sense, and that's a good way to go when it comes to investing in learning. Because so many CTOs, as we've said, challenged by, is the right skill set available right now, trying to hire talent, upskill the talent, all of that is a bottleneck, and it prevents innovation. It prevents not getting those products out on time. It delays projects from getting started or finished. So there's probably no denying that, yes, this all makes sense. And then it's like, how do we make it happen? So I think just letting colleagues know as a CTO that this is what you would want, and that's what we see. We see a lot of CTO as exec sponsors, and that's brilliant. And then once we're underway, they'll still check in every now and again. But I think delegation is probably an answer when the to-do list is very challenging. But recognizing it for sure is where it begins, isn't it? Recognize that this is something you want to do and you're prepared to invest in it. And then, set the scene of what it is, I guess, you're aiming for, your goals, and then have someone research the market and look at what the best tools and techniques and solutions are for the business that you've got running. And then hopefully, that will come together. But I feel very passionate, I guess, that those that invest really reap the rewards, and it's very exciting to see that journey, when you begin and then a year later and it goes on and on. It's fantastic. And lots of good examples that one could, I think, about in my mind, of where we've really supported true innovation and moving the needle from where they are today to where they need to get to. I think for CTOs, very busy, but hopefully embracing the need for flexible learning, embracing the need to put it on the roadmap, right? Put it on the agenda at a high level, and look at investing in learning for your employees, because that's the future. I mean, they're the future CTO, aren't they? They're the future.
Exactly.
And I think, how would you want to be invested in back in the day as part of your career journey? And we're still on that career journey, but learning, I think, sits at the heart of so much of that.
And like you're saying, it's such a virtuous spiral, in that as people get upskilled and can do things quicker or do more things, or give you flexibility in that regard, then you have more capacity to do more learning and upskill and so on. So I couldn't agree more. Well, we're out of time now, so thank you so much. Gone so quickly, hasn't it? I mean, I could talk about this topic forever, because it's so important, and there's so many different aspects to it, and it's such a great, for me, it's like the ultimate win-win topic. It really is, that we all need teams to do more, and everyone on the team wants to grow and do more as well. So it's, when you get that strategy right, I think it's so rewarding for everyone.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, it's been great. Thank you so much for the opportunity today to speak to the audience. And my LinkedIn, I think, is available.
We'll share our contact details, so for Lex and for me, so you can talk to us afterwards. And let me just check if there's anything else I need to share. Oh yes, so there's going to be, the next event is going to be on crucial KPIs to leverage during macroeconomic uncertainty, which sounds fantastic. We've shared the link for that as well, so do sign up and come. I love all these talks. There's so many varied topics. Oh yes, here we are. Sorry, it's by Milan Thacker, who's the product manager at Jellyfish, who's going to be sharing his thoughts on crucial KPIs to leverage during macroeconomic uncertainty. During the chat, he'll be discussing the top KPIs engineering leaders should track in order to provide continuous value to both customers and the business, including, of course, training metrics, right? And we'll be discussing how these KPIs can enable and empower engineering leaders to make sound business decisions during a period of economic instability. So that's everything. Thank you so much, Lex. It's been fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for watching and for joining in. And see you at the next one.
Thank you.